Greetings everybody, I am Haven the Hare and welcome to another episode of Campaign Diaries for the Hoard of the Dragon Queen, or my running of the Hoard of the Dragon Queen with the Heroes of Green Nest, or the Havenettes as I've been calling them because they've got to give me an actual proper group name. We're going to actually cover a lot in this because I am, again, behind on these Campaign Diaries. I do apologize, life's getting in the way. I'm actually going to cram about 5 sessions worth of us doing into this video, but what it will encompass is more or less all of Chapter 4 of Hoard of the Dragon Queen, which is the section of the long running of the travel between Baldur's Gate and Water's Deep. It's a long travel chunk, and if you want to check out how the behind the scenes on what I did to make this happen and facilitate this and make it go as fast as I did, feel free to watch the next video, which is how Haven did it for this same section, for this same chunk of Chapter 4. We are going to be covering basically game sessions, though, wise, 17 through 21. So this is 5 actual meetings of my group to do this entire episode. Part of the reason that it took so long, actually, you know what? Never mind that. Part of the reason it took so long, you can find out if you watch the How Haven Did It part. So we're just going to get straight to the story part. When last we left our brave adventurers, they were in Baldur's Gate. They had just wrapped up talking to Akin Suleiman about some side missions that they'd taken on to help Bob out, Bob the Carpenter, with his little problem, and found out that Bob was actually hired by an underground mob boss to help try and actually hunt and kill Remy and her friends. The next day is the day that the Hoard of treasure from Green Nest, or the Hoard in general, shall arrive in Baldur's Gate. So the party finds themselves making the hard decision that they are going to go and look for the wagons of the cult entering Baldur's Gate, as opposed to taking out some revenge on the mob boss who captured Bob's children and held them for ransom to make Bob send the party down into the sewers. They decide they're going to actually allow some of the gauntlet to take on that mission while they go, because they're the only ones who should recognize the cult as they arrive. They set up posts and watch for the cult, and it's more or less boring for the first about half the day. They watch a bunch of different wagon trains and caravans show up, unload. They talk to a couple different wagon runners and wagoneer, people working the different wagon caravans. Take a little post actually by convincing some guards to let them sit on the parapets and actually watch in the distance. Long and short of it, though, eventually they do recognize a few wagons that were recently repaired and repainted, but look surprisingly much like the same ones that they had seen at the cultist camp when they arrived. They proceed to follow the unloading of those wagons. Because if you've ever played in Baldur's Gate, you're not allowed to take wagons into Baldur's Gate, and then watch them schlepped by hand on the backs of servant laborers all the way across the city. They follow it all the way to another warehouse where another chunk of where the wagons are getting prepared to make the next round of travel. At this point, they then run back over, talk to Akin, and get hired on by the Baldur's Gate Trading Company to guard some wagons of theirs, and that same caravan leaving with the cult. They also then go talk to a couple of the constables for Baldur's Gate and warn them about the fact that the cult's there. The dwarf captain of the guard they talk to doesn't take them too seriously, and it wasn't unfortunately till they were leaving and they heard the captain's name as being Escobar, or they made a connection to the fact that this was actually the brother of the Escobar that was down, or cousin of the Escobar that they met down in Green Nest. Only they'd mentioned his name. And on the way out the door, they proceed to join up with the caravan that the cult has joined, and proceed to leave Baldur's Gate. The first week or so of travel, this is a long trip, by the way. This takes about a month and a half, depending on speed, to travel the entire length of a good chunk of the Sword Coast, anyway, between Baldur's Gate and Water's Deep by wagon, not really pushing it, just a good trot. They make their way all the way for about a week, I want to say, is what they traveled before the first bit of action happens. The rest of it's just them playing around and having fun and getting to know the rest of the caravan, and keeping an eye on the cultists who are keeping to themselves, which a lot of the wagons do. Some of them just keep to themselves, some intermingle and travel. A weekend, they find at the end of a caravan wagon off to the side of the road, broken down, that is in need of some assistance. A few of the caravan, including the parties, a few of the caravan, including the party and their wagon, offer to help them out a little bit, get them back on the road, and they join up with this. And it's three people in the caravan, 2 men and a woman. They look just like your average travelers, merchant types, and they join the wagons. They join their wagons. Now this caravan is enough that I want to say we said there were about 50 wagons in this caravan, and so every time that they sleep, they round up into 2 big circles on either side of the trail. And more or less like the first half is on one side and the other half is over on the other side. The next evening comes and goes, but in the morning a couple of bodies are found, and it's the bodies of the new wagon that came along, the 2 men and the women that they'd helped. It's easy. It's obviously were assassinated or they were killed in their sleep. The wagon, let's call him like the caravan leader, investigates this a little bit. They do some research, but they're not a police force. They didn't know these people that very well to begin with. They see ill play, but they have no evidence of who did it. So everybody kind of is on edge a little bit. Who killed the newcomers? And then the caravan gets underway again. Another night passes, another day, another night, and next morning, they find 3 more bodies. This time it's another one of the wagons in the second half of the caravan. And now suspicions are raised. Everybody's kind of on guard, including the party itself. The wagon that was abandoned, with the 3 members of the wagon that had died, they split amongst some of the other ones, and they leave the 2 wagons behind now and kind of condense their numbers down. It was part of another trading company, was the one that had passed away last night. On the 3rd night, the party keeps a much better eye and sets a better watch to figure out what's going on. About midnight, dark of night, Nahis, I want to say, our barbarian, is watching very carefully and notices some movement around the camp that is not normal. Somebody is basically walking up to multiple groups of people, leaning down a little bit, and then walking on. It looks very suspicious. She goes to investigate. About the same time, the other individual who was up with her, which I want to say was Arkin, sees the same thing happening on the other side of their wagon circle. So picture the wagons in a big circle, and then in front of each wagon its own little encampment of that wagon, or the groups of wagons, people who would have a fire going for food and such. So she starts to investigate the other one. They realize that it's these very cloaked figures. They can't make them out, very dark, and they seem to be casting something over the bodies as they come. They proceed to yell halt and to stop, and immediately are attacked by both of these individuals. A 3rd individual jumps on tops of the wagons and starts shooting arrows down at both Arkin and then eventually at Nahis on the side of the wagon circle. The party at that point raises, and because I don't know if we've mentioned this before, but Nahis actually has an axe of warning, which awakes her members of her party if suddenly they are in danger. Realizing at this moment that their party members are being attacked, the entire party is roused from their sleep, jumps up, and they're immediately involved in the combat. The combat ensues for a while. These 3 individuals are very quick, very dashing, very hard to hit, and they keep jumping in and around the different wagons. Eventually, Nahis is actually able to capture one of them by grappling them on the other side of the circle. The other party is involved with everybody, the other 2 on the other side. Eventually, the other 2 are eliminated, knocked out, if we're playing Pokemon, and the one is captured by Nahis, struggles and struggles until eventually she's forced to actually kill them until... I then say it at that point because as soon as they kill them, they notice that the 3 people looked like 3 individuals from one of the other wagons. But after their death, their features start to fade. and the features became less prominent and become very plain. These features end up becoming just very humanoid with absolutely no detail. And they realize that they're 3 doppelgangers that had infiltrated the wagons. The best that the party can think is that that group that they had picked up were the doppelgangers, and the 3 bodies that they'd found were from inside of their wagon, the party of the original wagon owners. And then they proceeded to start killing their way up through the food chain. They find that they were using multiple rings to cast sleep spells on everybody and then choose their targets so that nobody would be roused as they killed the ones that they wanted to take over next. So the party now has 3 rings that cast sleep, mass sleep, and they move on. They inform the wagon leaders, they wake everybody as best they could by Dispel Magic, inform the caravan leader that what's going on. Everybody's in shock, everybody's on edge, even the cultists at this point, because the cultists even have been very distant from the entire caravan until random people started dying. Then they started becoming more like they were hanging out with everybody. Again, it was that power in numbers. They were acting. But the threat seems to be over. The next night passes with nothing happening and nobody dying. The caravan continues on. But another week passes, and the next encounter happens. As the wagon caravan is trudging along, the sounds of combat reach the ears of the first couple of wagons, and they can see in the distance a few other wagons, like another small wagon caravan pulled off to the side of the road. The caravan leader asks for volunteers to go and investigate, and of course the party jumps up and says, "Hey, we'll do it!" And so they rush ahead of the caravan and find a small encampment of about half a dozen wagons. Some of them are wagons that are simply very large cages. There's smaller cages and other wagons and a bunch of tents laying around. And this is mid-morning, early morning when this happens. And what they see is about half a dozen humanoids fighting a Pegasus and a Griffin and an owl bear that have broken from what they can see, broken free of their cages. They also see a small hooded individual in and amongst all the cages on one side. As the party approaches, they notice that the humanoids are attacking or trying to capture the beasts. The monsters are in turn attacking the humanoids, and as they watch, the hooded humanoid that was behind the cages lets loose another cage and a gargoyle flies out. Looks like she's freeing the animals. The best guess that they are given is that this is like a traveling caravan with oddities and animals and monsters that they show off, and one individual is freeing them, and those monsters are now fighting for their freedom against the caravan. A couple of perception rolls went really high, and Callie specifically, and I think Fire, end up seeing that these animals look a little bruised, a little more beaten and worse for wear, a little signs of neglect on them as they fight. This is the tipping point, and the party decides that they are going to help free the animals and free the monsters and turn on the humanoids and help fight them off. Now, some of the monsters do attack them at first because random new humanoids, but they don't attack the monsters, and the other hood individual proceeds to release a couple more. I think another gargoyle was released, I might be mistaken on that, as well as a cat creature which opens its cage but doesn't run out. The party defeats the humanoids, most of them, and then last 2 break and run for the mountains. The individual does not introduce herself, but simply says that she is a ranger and had been following this this circus, shall we say, of oddities. Very unhappy after seeing how the animals were being treated, and vowed to free them, and she did. She has no ill will with them, thanks to the adventurers for their help, but wishes to build them adieu and travel on her way with and let the animals free. The party agrees, and they let her go, and she and the other animals leave, actually following the last 2 carnival workers down who had left. The last cage makes a couple of noises, and it really brings the attention of Fire. Fire takes a closer look and realizes that trapped inside is a displacer beast, but not acting normal. It's being aggressive, but it's also being very guarded and staying towards the back of its cage. Upon further inspection, they notice there's actually a displacer beast cub deep inside. The party tries to coax the displacer beast out, and eventually it does, and it runs, leaving the cub behind. The party adopts the cub, specifically Fire. So now Fire has this little displacer beast, and by little I mean it's already the size of a house cat, but it looks relatively young. She decides she's going to take care of it and raise it. The party then meets back up with the caravan as it comes nearer, explains what they found, explains what they saw. Some looting happens of the carnival's belongings. The party doesn't bother. They didn't see anything really worth taking, but some of the tents are taken, some of the wagons are taken also for parts, and the caravan continues. Another week or so passes. The party, about midday, the caravan comes across a chunk of the land that's starting to look overgrown, dark. The sun is blotted out by clouds. A fog is rolling in. It becomes very dark, very, very ominous, very quickly. But the caravan continues. And as the caravan is going, it finally gets to the adventurers' wagons, the wagons for the Baldur's Gate Trading Company that they're guarding, reaches a certain point, and they see a big green flash emanate from underneath the caravan, from underneath one of their wagons. And out of the fog starts coming zombies. They proceed to continuously attack and stop the party. They end up losing a horse, but eventually they held off. But they just keep coming, wave after wave of zombies, out of this magical fog and haze that has suddenly been aroused. Eventually, they do find that there's actually a glyph in the ground underneath their first wagon. Throwing a anti-magic potion that they had actually acquired back in Baldur's Gate, they managed to dispel the arcane glyph that's underneath, and the pulsing green light goes away, and the fog starts to lift, and the zombies all just fade away. The corpses are still there, but it looks like this was a trap set. They don't know by who. They realize upon further inspection that some of the cult's wagons were also attacked in this. So the cult is probably not to blame for this particular incident. But there's no evidence of who. The caravan leader questions the party about their actions and about who might want to cause their wagons harm. In the end, it is assumed that it might be a rival trader or a rival merchant who's going after the Baldur's Gate Trading Company. At least that's the tale that they spin to the caravan leader. Patching their wounded, usually they buy another horse off of one of the other merchants that had an extra one from all the looting, and they continue on. We are now a week's out from arriving at Water's Deep. And the last stop is an actual oasis. All the time up to this, they've come across a few little inns now and then they camped in. But most has been camping outdoors, beside your wagon, very rustic, very hard. They come across Daggerfall. And Daggerfall's a village, or a small little village city, about another week's travel from Water's Deep. So it's south of Water's Deep. But it is known as like the last main rest stop before you get to Water's Deep. A lot of travel comes through here. The party stops and they decide they're going to actually get an inn for the night and actually get a real bed. The wagons are all put into warehouses and stored and protected so everybody can kind of take a break for a night before they can take the last week's journey into Water's Deep. While they are in the pub and drinking, a boisterous individual starts talking about this foolhardy halfling that had hired them to protect him as he went for a meeting, and that he had paid them up front, and that was stupid because they obviously were never going to go to the meeting now, and they got this really cool sword, and he brandishes this ornate rapier on the table that's very very ornately decorated, very pretty. Totally not this thug's look, though. It very much looks like a entertainer's blade or a nobleman's blade, not a ruffian, scoundrel type. So, and upon rolling even further, Callie realizes that it's her father's blade. So, the party, or Callie and a couple of other members, go and interrogate these individuals, find out what's going on. They make a couple of deals. They end up getting into a drinking game, and end up winning the sword from them. And finding out where this meeting was supposed to happen, and find out it was actually supposed to happen like in just a few hours, like at dusk. And so the party then takes off to go find out where Callie's father's sword came from, and who's the halfling that they got it from. They make their way to a building on the outskirts of the town, an old abandoned-looking farmhouse. And in the basement, they find the building empty, but they find light coming from the basement. They go down into the basement and investigate, hear voices. And it sounds like an interrogation. They eventually make their way into the basement and into one room, and it's a hallway with two rooms. One has a door open, one has a door closed. And they go into the one with the room with the door open. My hands are in front of my face. They go into the one with the room with the doors open, and they see a very noble-looking individual, very handsome individual, and a pillar in the center, like a support pillar for the basement. And there is a halfling handcuffed and chained to the pillar, all up and everything. And the nobleman stops talking about the time that they come through the door, but what they hear was, "You need to make a decision now." And he turns and says, "I see you brought guests." They talk for a few minutes, and the nobleman describes that this individual owes him a debt, and he's reneged on it. And his employer has sent him to collect on that debt. And so he is here to collect him, or to convince him to follow through. The individual hung up is out of it. He ends up starts screaming in pain and agony and woeing and wailing, and just seems to be being tortured, but nothing's touched him. The individual isn't touching him either. They ask what he's doing, and he simply repeats himself and the fact that we are trying to convince him to do the right thing. The party isn't taking this. The torture is what eventually actually sends Nahis over the edge, and she charges in raging and swings at him. And as soon as she swings, her axe stops higher than the body of the person in front of her, and then the illusion starts to fade, and it's no longer a very gorgeous-looking man, but a very tall devil, specifically a bone devil, standing before them. He gnashes his long teeth at them and hisses, and in their brains they hear him speaking, "You should have stayed out. This had nothing to do with you," as he proceeds to strike at Nahis. Nahis proceeds to strike back. A battle then ensues. They start to fight back and forth with this bone devil. Some of the party is hanging outside of the room, or just outside of it, and as they are, I think specifically Callie was hanging outside because she's, and she turns, and out of the wall materializes this hag, this disgusting woman, and she immediately casts a couple of magic missiles at her, and she ducks and dodges them, and then runs into the room and slams the door shut. They proceed to fight the rest of the party. Now it's a 7-on-1 combat. Well, 6 really, because at this point Callie is still holding the door shut. So she's holding the door. They find out that the halfling's name is Timothy. He introduces himself and recognizes the sword, introduces himself as a traveling guy who's out trying to seek adventure and looking for the rest of his family. Finds out this is actually Callie's half-brother from a relationship that her father had back in, shall we say, college, that he didn't know about. Once his own family had passed away during a recent skirmish, he decided to find his father, found Durlan, had talked with him, had decided that he was going to seek out find Callie, reconnect with his family. Now he's found her, tells Callie to keep the sword. It's her father's sword anyway. They're happy. And then there's banging on the door. Big banging on the door. The door is, we've got guards outside, or anyway, individuals claiming they want Timothy. Hand him over and they'll allow him to leave. The party decides that they're going to disguise Eddie as Timothy and then hide Timothy and then see what they want. So they do this, open the door, Eddie goes for it, they immediately grab Eddie, pull him out and says, alright, we're going to walk this way and then you guys can pass the staircase and then you guys can leave and we'll pretend like nothing happened. Now he pushes them further, like, what's going on here? Why do you want Timothy? What are you going to do with him? They don't really want to answer any more questions. It ends up being a standstill of Nahis and Arkin and a couple of the guards going back and forth over Eddie. And eventually the guards snap and say, oh, you lost your chance. That they attack. A battle ensues. The hag attacks again. They're fighting the hag. They're hiding 12 cell swords. They eventually drag Eddie off into the other room. The cell swords do. They're trying to chase him down. We've got wind blasting down hallways. The party eventually fights them off. Now, in the middle of all this, there was a light that was seen flash from inside of the storeroom where Timothy was hiding. Eventually, Eddie drops his disguise, starts shooting arrows once there's like 2 or 3 of them in the hotel in the room with him. They bash down the door. They save Eddie. They go back. They start looking for Tim, and he's gone. We have no idea where. No note. So, taking the sword with them, and they kind of ransack the cell swords. A few of them actually gave up and were allowed to leave because it's not worth their life. They want to live to get paid again. So they move on, and they end up going back and find a lot more questions than answers. Like, where'd Timothy go, and why didn't Callie know she had a half brother? But that's the end of that. They come back just in time to see they get some sleep, and they get up in the morning, they're preparing, and they notice a couple of things at this point. As the caravan's preparing to leave, on and off throughout this entire caravan ride, there have been occasional people joining and leaving various wagons and caravans if they were only going for like half the caravan and then getting off and going on their own way. But one of the things that it was consistent was none of the cultists' wagons, none of the wagons that were being run by the cultists had anybody join them and nobody left them. They just stayed the way they were and they very much kept to themselves. But finally now here in Daggerfall, a hooded, cloaked individual does join their wagons, followed by a gnome that seems to be following close behind and keeping an eye on that hooded figure, and then she ends up sneaking into one of the other wagons behind them. Lutau ends up actually rolling phenomenally well and manages to walk past them on their way down to one of the other wagons to ask a question of somebody else, and notices the tattoos of a wizard of Thay is who the hooded individual was. Lutau then comes back and informs the rest and goes, this is bad news. That's a wizard of Thay. That's not good. He fills the party in on who the wizards are, and they proceed to decide what they're going to do about it next. So the party has left Daggerfall. It's about a week's more travel to Water's Deep. About halfway there, a couple of days in, the gnome that they spy jumping into one of the others' wagons makes their way over to their breakfast meal, nonchalantly sits down and says, act like nothing's happened. And she proceeds to reach over and take one of the porridge bowls from one of the players, I think Callie, proceeds to dig around in it and start pulling little chunks of metal out with her dagger. And says, I wouldn't eat this. And hands it back. Says, you want to know more? Talk to me tonight. And she leaves. The party, of course, goes over and checks the rest of their store supply and find out, sure enough, that about half their food has been tainted with these metal shards. And so they pour it out. They question the cook that came with Boulder's Gate. And he's like, I haven't touched anything. I would never do it. And he seems to be on the up and up. They don't feel like he's lying. This is definitely somebody sabotaged their food from outside of it. The next night, the gnome does approach their fire. Here's Susette's Gemma. She has been following the wizard and noticed that the wizard had joined up with that wagon of very unsavory individuals that are keeping to themselves, and she noticed that one of the savory individuals helped actually put the metal shards in their food. She doesn't know who they are, but she knows who he is, but she doesn't share. She's like, I've been following him, he's bad news. And They suggest that the only way to make sure that this happens again is that they kill the individual that poisoned their food. The party doesn't like this idea. And they dismiss it, saying, no, we'll just keep a better watch. And so they do. They end up actually making sure that they are like watching from the actual wagons themselves. They're posting multiple guards throughout the night. And they're going to suffer some exhaustion, but they want to make sure everything stays on the up and up. However, the next morning, a member of the cultist wagons is found dead. Stabbed with a short sword. Nobody can tell who. There's no other evidence. The party thinks Gemma did it, but they can't prove it. And she's kind of disappeared again. The rest of the trip goes without any issue other than it's very tense between the cult wagons and the rest of the cabin train as one of their members had died. And they've been portraying themselves as one company. So the fact that one of their members passed, was murdered, and nobody was caught, gives them a reason to try and push the edges of like who did it. But the next few days pass without incident, and they arrive at the City of Splendors of Water's Deep. The party gets paid by the Baldur's Gate Trading Company, and then proceeds to follow the wagons of the cult all the way to the other side of the northern part of the city, to a warehouse that they see is guarded by a half-ogre and sealed, no window, one door in and out, one big sliding door. They investigate it, they don't really see any way in. They see a bunch of the cult members leave after the wagons are all parked inside of it to go about their business, it looks like, probably to enjoy the town. The party proceeds to get a room at an inn nearby with a window overlooking the warehouse and proceed to watch. And that's where we ended that last session of the 20th. So that's the big chunk of Chapter 4 for Hoard of the Dragon Queen, the traveling portion, the portion a lot of people don't like because they find it to be a grind. If you'd like to know more about how I did it, why I chose the encounters I did, and where I got the ideas from it and who helped me out, by all means watch the How Haven Did It section for this exact same portion of, for this section of Chapter 4. If you want to know more about the campaign diaries, I will be posting again some more of them. And let's see, cliffhanger. Where's the gold going next? Is this the final destination, or is there more? Are they following the right wagons? They made a guess back at Baldur's Gate. Where did Timothy go? And how are they going to handle trying to raise a displacer beast? If you want to know more of those, feel free to continue watching the rest of my videos. I've been Haven the Hare, and as a final saying, I will never monetize this channel, but if you did want to help support me, by all means look below, you'll see links to the card game I created, 5-Minute Sword Fight, as well as I have an Etsy store where I make chainmail dice pouches, so if you'd like that. And at least of the filming of this video, I have not reached my 100 subscribers yet. When I do reach 100 subscribers, I'll give away a free chainmail dice pouch to anybody in the continental US. Just tell me the colors you want, and I'll send it out to you. With that being said, thank you for watching. I've been Haven the Hare, and may you make all of life sing.